Hey folks, I'm your host Trevor Coote, and welcome back to Business is Fucking Hard. Today I'm talking to Brian Budd, a guy who has reinvented himself more times than most of us can imagine. He has worked high-level sales in the software world and navigated capital markets in the junior mining industry. Then Brian, with the help of business partners and his wife, built a medical fitness franchise that got decimated by COVID after only 2 years. Now he's finding a whole new career in the real estate sector. This episode isn't about business as much as it is about risk and family and the moments that force you to ask, what the hell do I do now? Brian is vulnerable, honest, and doesn't hold back. If you've ever taken a big swing and landed flat on your back, this one's for you. Let's get into it. Hi there. I'm Trevor Coote, and this is Business is Fucking Hard, the podcast where business owners pull back the curtain and talk about the realities of owning a business. We'll hear their stories, learn some lessons, and have some fun along the way. Thanks for joining us.
All right.
Brian Budd, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Trev. Thanks so much.
So we're both giggling a little bit. This took us a little while to get the gremlins out of the system, get all the technology working, and here we are. So thanks for being here. Thanks for persevering through all of that tech challenge.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You and I, our paths crossed a little while ago, but we haven't been longtime friends or acquaintances. I'm always fascinated. I love when I get introduced to somebody or meet them, and we just start going down the path of past business experiences in the conversation. And of course, it always twigs me to invite people to come on, and you are quick to say yes. So I'm really looking forward to diving into that story a lot more and hearing a lot more about your experiences and seeing if there's some lessons in there for the listeners. So with that, as I always do, let's start the conversation with what got you introduced to business and what that introduction to entrepreneurship looked like.
Yeah, I mean, I won't bore you too much. I mean, if I go way back when, as a kid, the usual sort of paper route, window washing business, etc. But I think when things really started to go for me, I was in software for about 11 years, I guess, managing sales teams. And it was when I left the software industry that I got into the mining sector. And really entrepreneurial from a perspective, we didn't generate revenue. We were a publicly traded company. We didn't generate revenue. But I did go from I'm not going to say cushy sort of sales manager role into a position where, we had to raise our own capital. We weren't revenue generating. We had to raise capital to forward the project forward, and then also for, G&A as well, right? So, you kind of raise money to pay yourself,
right,
so to speak. So that's where that started. Started at the bottom, went from a management role in a multi-billion-dollar software company to investor relations.
right.
So sort of started there, and with aspirations of running my own deal. Those were my aspirations. I saw a lot of blue sky in the opportunity versus just, showing up. I can't even say in software a 9 to 5 because it wasn't a 9 to 5. I mean, I was downtown by 6:30 in the morning, and then I was home around probably the same time, 7:00 at night, and we were quarterly based in that industry as well, quotas, etc. But,
right.
Moved into investor relations and learning the business from the capital markets perspective. Got my securities course done too to learn the business. And I'd be lying if I said, oh yeah, everything was peaches. There were many days that I was like, oh, what did I do? Took a pretty substantial pay cut. going from software into the mining industry. But it really fed my entrepreneurial spirit because we were building a company,
Right.
and that's what I loved about it. And I had some good mentors around me as well. So it was really sort of that blue sky that I grabbed onto and drove from there. Um, from that, so I was there for about in that industry, I guess, for again 7-8 years, and went from investor relations to where I was president of a publicly traded company. Um, went through a lot of ups and downs in the markets there. We had a gold asset in a remote Canadian jurisdiction that brought a whole bunch of issues with it. But I came in, and the whole idea there too was to get as many sort of forms or access to capital as possible. So, you're meeting with bankers and brokers and institutions, and I had the opportunity to travel the world and all through the United States, the UK. Actually, even had the opportunity to go to Africa. We were looking to do a project in Africa. So it was a really neat experience, and really getting a lot of experience from a capital markets perspective, and sort of how they work.
Let's pause there, Brian. I want to
Yeah,
really dig into that because to be entirely fair, the guests I typically get, or the conversations I'm having, are small medium enterprise operations with um, generally less than a couple of hundred employees, and not and usually from a revenue generating, right, like
yeah,
more non-publicly traded companies, not have to worry about the SEC component of it and all of that kind of thing. So I want to get there. I want to dive into a little bit of that. But before we go there, what timeline were you in the software piece, would you say?
yeah. Software. Two, actually, 1998.
Okay.
1998, 2000 is
Yeah.
when I got into software,
Yeah.
and then left around. Oh my goodness, 2000. Well, I guess it was 2009.
Yeah.
It would be would be about the date that I
So
left
a
software.
lot happening in that timeline, in that industry. You would, as you pointed out, not a 9 to 5, but job security. There was lots of opportunity. Companies were growing like crazy. You get options in something, or
Yeah,
levered over to another company based on options or whatever. You're getting all kinds of incentive to continue to do really good in that industry. What was the catalyst for you to say, okay, even with all of that context, I'm going to step out on this ledge and go to this startup unknown and work my tail off to help them start from nothing?
yeah. So I guess it would be a bit of well, to be truthful, boredom.
Yeah,
I was bored doing
sure.
what I was doing. I was able to move up within the company, but I tried for other roles, didn't pan out. So I was kind of at a crossroads of like, okay. Plus, we went through 3 acquisitions. So in software, we started out. I just don't. I just for privacy's sake, I'll just keep names out of it.
Sure,
But
sure, sure. Yeah.
we were a pretty small software company when we first started, and actually, when I got hired on with them, they had just come off a pretty big layoff a few months prior to that, and then got the capital to hire more. Relatively small software company in Vancouver, then got acquired by one of our competitors. And that was an interesting acquisition because most of the management team that I was part of stayed, and the acquiring company's management was dismissed.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it was kind of an interesting
Yeah,
acquisition from that perspective.
yeah.
Then from there, we grew the business, and then we were bought by a multi-billion-dollar worldwide software company.
Gotcha.
And it was at that time that I kind of felt like, you know, you will be assimilated. didn't I seem to like
Yeah. Yeah.
that build mentality versus just kind of on a hamster wheel and doing the same thing day in and day out, collect a
Sure.
paycheck. I got bored with that.
Yeah.
I needed sort of some excitement and a change. And I was recruited into the mining business through a friend of mine that I was mentoring from a sales perspective. And he came to me and said, you should really look to see what we're doing. Um, and I resisted. Then finally, when this multi-billion-dollar company finally acquired us, that's when I'm like, this is just going to be, I hate to say it, same shit, different day.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I kind of wanted something new. Wasn't proactively looking, but when I was approached, I'm like, okay, you know what?
Sure.
I'll take a look.
So you're not looking. This opportunity finds you with a startup, public non-revenue generating startup. What was I have a little bit of the timeline of your family. You would have had younger kids
Mm-hmm.
at that time. What was that stepping out onto that ledge like even though you're inspired by boredom, you take a look at the opportunity, was there a sense of fear, uncertainty? Was it just excitement because of the uncertainty? Where were you kind of emotionally and with your family?
Yeah, I think. Well, one is I have an amazing wife that supports me on things, and she knows me really well, so
Yeah,
she
right.
knew
Yeah,
she knew my time was done where I
sure.
was. Um, and it took a big toll, like you said. Yes, my family was quite young, and we have three kids, and they were quite young. And again, I'll just sort of bear it here. Being quarterly based was very stressful. And of course, quarter end always ended around holidays, always ended, it was just a stressful time. I'm always excited about new opportunities.
Yeah,
I was excited about it. And I think, the guys too did a great job of presenting upside and presenting what I could do. And it was a good job from there. So I was definitely excited about it. And as I said, I was done with software.
yeah,
So I don't want to say I was checked out. I didn't check out, but I was like, I don't see myself doing this for decades
right.
beyond, right? So it's like, yeah, I need to be fair to the company I worked for and to be fair to myself. I need to move on.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so, um, so I did have conversations with them as well. So they had a top talent within the company. So I had a discussion with HR, et cetera, around that. Being on the top talent list, they kind of do whatever they can to try and keep you. But even at that, I just felt, you know what, I think my time's done. And just to be fair, I bowed out,
yeah,
and went to this other opportunity. So I was excited, for sure, because I saw the upside
yeah,
of what the opportunity brings. Um, Now, as I shared with you earlier, there were definitely times I'm like, oh, what did I do?
yeah, yeah.
Where that fear did set in. Actually, maybe fear is a wrong word, because I find fear will paralyze. I was never paralyzed, but
Just uncertainty,
uncertainty and doubt. I
doubt.
think
Yeah.
that would
Okay.
probably be a better way
Yeah.
of putting it. And again, having such an amazing wife, she just continued to encourage me, and she's just like, "You're a hard worker. Keep going. You'll find your stride." And
Yeah.
yeah,
What was the title you mentioned it? The title of the role that you went into with the startup?
investor relations.
Investor relations. So was there a lot of upgrading, education, training? You did mention you got your securities course. I'm assuming that was a little bit later. For the initial transition, was there like an actual, like you went from sales to investor relations? Was it like, okay, it's just still talking to people and basically selling them on an idea rather than on a software?
Yeah, pretty much. I think. But again, I now entered a world where I didn't know the lingo.
Yeah.
So that's why actually I jumped into my securities course right away.
Oh, you did. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
misread that.
I jumped into that right away
I'm just
because
the host.
yeah.
I make assumptions.
All good, buddy. All
Yeah.
good.
Okay. Okay.
I jumped into it right away because I knew I can't look stupid. So I have to understand the lingo.
Sure.
Um, so did that. Obviously, got around as many as my mentors as I could within the business to learn. Going with them out and meeting institutional investors, meeting investors, meeting. So I can kind of pick it up on that. So I'm a doer. Um, I'm not a good sort of textbook kind of individual. I'm a let's do it
Yeah.
kind of individual, and that's how I learned. Made a lot of mistakes, lots of mistakes, but I'm also not the kind of individual that will BS his way. I will say, I'll go, sorry, Trevor. You know what? That's a great question, Trevor. Can I get back to you on that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then I think that also brings respect to the other person, because the last thing I want to do is give incorrect information, especially, and you had mentioned it earlier around SEC. So we were actually trading on the TSXV. So we had the Toronto Stock Exchange that we were accountable to. In the public markets, there are things from a governance, things you can and cannot do and can and cannot say.
Right.
So you have to be very careful that way, because again, when you're talking to people on the other phone, you don't know who they could be. A regulator, you don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Were
so when I jumped in, that's what I did.
were any of the missteps that you made early on, kind of as a result of not having that education, not knowing what the implications are of saying one thing when in your own mind, well, that's not a big deal, but for a commission or some sort of regulatory body, it is a big deal. Was there anything that you kind of it took kind of a leadership team? And I mean, I'm going down this road just for fun. You don't have to
Yeah.
answer any of this, but yeah, like was there anything like you mentioned learning through mistakes and that kind of thing? Was there
Yeah, I
anything
did
tragic?
not get myself in trouble from
Yeah.
a
Okay.
regulation perspective,
Yeah.
a regulator's perspective. I did have an understanding of the capital
Sure.
markets previous, um, so I was very careful that way, because I also knew, I was also an investor
Yeah. Right.
myself, so I knew that investors will always try to push the envelope to get information out of you. Well, now you're talking inside information.
Right.
The simplest way to look at it is anything we put out in a press release, I can talk about.
Right.
Anything outside that, like drilling down into some of the nitty gritty stuff, nope, can't tell
Yep.
you that. Nope, can't
Yep.
say that. Right.
Yep. Yep.
So,
Yep.
I knew where the line was. Really, what I wanted to be able to do is when I got in front, because my goal was to have my own deal. So that was my ultimate goal. So I had to make sure when I had to raise capital for
You had the
that
name.
deal that I had to understand the language.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
And you said, I think you said 7 years. Were you in the mining side for 7 years? Yeah. So and to president in that time, what did that transition look like?
yeah. So it went. The organization that we had, actually, there were oh my goodness, 5 to 7 publicly traded companies under one umbrella. So the
Holy.
reason that we did that was to spread the capital costs and share intellectual property, share just the overall cost, because
Right.
we were all junior in the junior mining space.
Right.
So I kind of focused in on, well, there were 2 organizations that I focused in on. And the one that we had the gold asset, that one I just sort of started. I guess my chairman and CEO at the time was giving me more responsibility, was giving me more things to take care of. And then eventually it got to a point where I think he wanted to move into do other things. And so that opened the door for me to transition into the president role. And I think too, it's like, it was um, I was sort of spearheading a lot of the introductions to the capital side of things. So I think sometimes people thought of me as the face. Um, keep in mind, like the CEO at the time and chairman, he's a geologist, very savvy businessman as well. So he was kind of, showing me the ropes, so to speak,
Right.
um, and mentoring me through that. And then it was just a transition. He kind of wanted to get into some other things, and so I stepped into that role. I mean, had to get shareholder approval, had to get director approval, to move into that, and went from there.
Big piece, a red thread that flows through so many of the episodes, the conversations that I have here, is that learning by doing. The just the aspect of being a business owner, you learn so much that you're not going to learn by studying a textbook. And you even talked about it, like you're not a textbook guy. But also, and kind of in conjunction, that mentorship piece. And some people are extremely intentional. Some of the guests that I've had, have like even not policy, but handbooks on mentorship within their organization. You had the benefit of your colleague in the company. Just talk a little bit about what that experience was like that mentorship piece from him, but also where you've seen it elsewhere, and maybe where you've been able to pass that on.
Yeah, I mean, going through it from sort of the start to finish in that industry, um, the mentorship was there, but it wasn't. How do I describe this? It wasn't proactive to me. It was proactive to him.
Sure, sure,
So it was really, I always made sure I was in the room. I always made
right,
sure, I'm like, hey, what meetings do you have booked today? Well, I'm going to see so and so. Okay, can I come with you? So I was very proactive in that, um, mentorship. It wasn't more of like, oh, here, let me take you under my wing and I'll show you the business. Show me the business was there, but I had to be the proactive one
yeah,
to do that and to get in the room. And that's what I was successful at. It was getting in the room, and then listening to how deals are structured, getting introduced to some influential people in the financial market. Many times I sat in the office of a very successful businessman in the local Vancouver market. Um, you would know if I said the name, but again, I'll
yep,
just keep that to
sure, yeah,
myself. But
fair, yep, yep,
so it was very interesting to get in those rooms and listen to how business is done.
right,
It was invaluable from a mentorship perspective. And then, for me, I'd probably say the mentorship for me went probably when I got out of that industry, and so I was able to glean that experience and then take that into my other business venture after mining, with that. So
yeah, yeah. It's always fascinating to me that, like, mentorship can be so intentional, but it tends to happen regardless. And the other piece that I always pull out of it is that there's a perception that the mentee is the beneficiary of a mentee relationship.
mm,
But the mentor, there's as much, like, all the research shows that there's as much benefit to the mentor as there is to the mentee. And in this case, I mean, probably, if there was reflection by your colleague, by your the CEO of the day, he'd probably be able to pinpoint some things that he learned by as a result of a question that you asked or whatever it was. But on the other hand, it also created a succession plan for him,
yeah,
maybe unbeknownst at the time, but you getting that experience, him seeing your ability to adapt and to be in those rooms, gave that confidence for him to be able to, when he wanted to pursue something else, get you into that president role and go to the shareholders and identify that there's confidence, and all of that kind of plays out, right? So
yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
Let's talk about that shareholder piece, because I really am. I did. I finished. I think I finished up my Master of Laws late last year, end of 2024, and I was really fascinated by all the learning that I did related to shareholder activism, shareholder relationship, the impact that the consideration that has to be given to shareholders and the impact that they can have. Um, just speak from maybe just an experiential perspective, just kind of generally about that, and any specific again, without any
Yeah.
specifics and stuff, but a scenario where it really amplified that relationship.
Yeah. So my experience where,
he says with the most exhausting
yeah,
start.
I think it took me a while to learn this, but and I hate to paint a brush because not all were like
Sure,
this, but
sure.
for the most part, they're your friends because they want inside information,
Yeah,
right? They want an advantage. And again, I'm not going to paint the brush right across, but for the most part, I'm getting phone calls from, even so we talk about shareholders, but even brokers who have the clients that are shareholders,
right.
they too want the inside information so they can
Sure.
advise their client on, okay, you need to buy or sell at this particular time, right?
Yeah.
So, um, well, I'll share this. I actually had to take a restraining order out on a shareholder once.
Yes. Here we go.
Yeah. So I had a shareholder that, I'm trying to remember the time that, I mean, we were in the gold industry, right? So if you go back to like 2008 crash, things started to kick back up again. I guess 2010, 11 through 12, gold, it was sort of a boom. Things just dropped out again, like, you know, 13, 14, 15, or I can't remember when gold tanked specifically, but I actually had a shareholder. He would call. I have no idea how he did this, but he would take up all our phone lines. He would just keep calling, 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 calling. So our phone lines would get busy. He would call me at all hours of the morning and evening. He would berate me, saying, your performance with the stock, etc., is poor, blah, blah, blah. And then he threatened me with, I know where you live. And that's when I got the police involved.
Yeah.
Turns out this individual was known to police. And that's as much as I'll say about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But after that, I didn't hear from him. But for the most part, other than that incident, I always had good interaction with my shareholders. And they knew that I can't indulge inside information.
Sure.
So I would just continue to build the relationship. And there were certain shareholders when I knew their position in the company too, that I wouldn't give them inside information, but if they phoned, I'll take their call.
Right.
Um,
Sure.
and going on from there, I actually had one shareholder email me and say, "Hey, I'm coming in from New York. I'd like to meet with you." And I'm like, "Great, no problem." So I'm in the office. He comes in. He must have been 150 years old. Sits down at my desk. And again, just like, I'm not happy with the share price, blah, blah, blah. And so finally I looked at him. I said, "How many shares do you own?" "Well, I own 100 shares. Okay, we were trading at 25 cents at the time.
Yeah.
So
Do you want
I
me to buy you a coffee on the way out?
I know exactly. So I was just kind of like, the cheeky part of me wanted to pull my checkbook out and go, "Here, why don't I buy those shares off you? In fact, I'll buy them at 50 cents from you."
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was interesting. But for the most
That's
part,
fun.
most of my interactions with the shareholders was quite pleasant, professional. You knew who the professional traders or investors were and who weren't.
Yeah.
You really got to know that. So
Yeah.
yeah, but
I want to move on in your story. But before we do that, did it get to revenue at any point?
no,
Oh yeah, crazy.
no, a mine takes decades to get into production. Decades.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We had
Yeah.
a very large land position, massive land position with high grade gold across all of it. We were only focusing in on 3.5 kilometers of a 350-kilometer stake of land. And we
Right.
had gold across all of it. We were in a very tough jurisdiction. We developed it. Absolutely. We developed from a very small amount of gold to a very large amount of gold that we did find through drilling. But no, it is not in production.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so you give me the story on the transition out of mining, not mining for gold.
Yeah. Yeah. So we were acquired. Our company got acquired.
Yeah.
Junior Swisher got acquired, so moved on, and I think we did well by the shareholders. So that would have been 2015, late 2015. And I traveled a lot. Like I'd have my super elite status done by end of Q2 every year. Like I traveled a lot. So I like, you know
Wow.
what? I missed a large part of my kids' sort of younger years. So I just said, you know what? I'm going to take 6 months off and do nothing but focus on my family. And, you know, I had some revelations through that process about who I was. And so that was interesting, but I just really focused on my family. So my plan was 6 months. 6 months turned into 6 years. So of not really landing anywhere. So what I'll do, I'll give you sort of the framework, and then wherever you want to drill, you can drill
Yep.
out. So that was 2015, and when I say 6 years, 6 years of financing myself.
Yeah.
In 2017, when I say we, I had a business partner. We got into the medical fitness business. We secured some franchises in that industry, and we opened up a couple of clinics. And what we did is we focused on fitness for people with chronic disease. So individuals with diabetes, heart disease, cancer, joint replacement, etc. That's what we focused in on. So we opened up 2 locations in the Lower Mainland with that. So now it's like going from that to another area. I kind of have this theme of getting into things I know nothing about.
There's a theme.
Yeah, there's definitely a theme, but the principles are all pretty much the same,
Right.
right? It's just like, okay, instead of selling a gold asset to someone, now I'm selling health and wellness.
Sure.
And I had some personal experiences through that as well that I could relate to, and we were helping people. So my wife got involved in the business as well, so that was neat. My business partner's wife was involved in the business.
Getting into this venture, was there like a business plan, a proper structure? Was there financing required? And then the other piece is kind of the delineation of roles going into a business with a partner. Each of you bring kind of a strength. Was all of that kind of framework built out?
Yeah. So from I guess 2015, when I got out of the public markets, to where we ended up into these clinics, I had looked at lots of different businesses.
Okay.
My ultimate goal was to acquire a business and build it from there. I looked at lots of different ones in lots of different industries, and just nothing really stuck. This one resonated for me because my mom passed away, and my mom really struggled with chronic disease. My dad at the time had a major heart attack, and he actually couldn't get where he lived. There wasn't a lot of rehab for him out of his heart attack. And I'm like, this is crazy. There has to be something. And that's where this opportunity really resonated for me, personally.
Right.
Resonated. Yeah, we had to. Uh, yeah, we had to raise capital. When I say raise, we went to the usual, the BDC,
Yep.
banks, etc. And we put a lot of our own money into the deal.
Sure.
As well. So so we did that. As I said, we opened up two clinics really 6 months apart from each other. So in hindsight, was that the smartest thing to do? Maybe not, but we both knew. I mean, there was the 2 of us, me and my partner, and we kind of saw it as, well, we know that the revenue from one won't support both of us. So we at least need two, where the combined revenue would be able to support the
Right.
lifestyle we're accustomed to at the
Gotcha.
time. But yeah, we went through, we had to find space. And when we found space, we looked for space in professional buildings. Doctors were medical practitioners was really sort of our go-to as far as
Makes sense.
getting referrals. So finding space in the Lower Mainland was a challenge. It had, very low vacancy rates. It was a bit of a challenge. So it took us some time to find proper space. So I went through the whole leasing experience as well, which I did do when we had our space downtown for when I was in the mining industry, but for the most part, I'm the one, signing the guarantees. I'm the one putting my name on
Yep.
the bottom line there, right?
Yep.
So that was very interesting. Went through that, then had to go through the build out. Making sure we found someone good that could do the build out. As far as the business plan that you said, these were franchises. They were in their infancy of franchising. So there was a framework, but really my business partner and I sort of, put that all together ourselves as to what we saw while operating within the framework of the franchise. I have a long-standing sales background, as did my business partner. But where my business partner, what he had was in the group insurance business, is where he had experience. So that really helped a lot too, because he had experience in getting into like the Sun Lifes, the big companies. So together we were a really good fit.
Was there promise? Were you seeing promise in the businesses? Were you achieving the business plan as you had kind of framed it out? Were things moving in the direction that you anticipated based on any research that you might have done before you pulled the trigger?
Yeah, absolutely. We did a lot of due diligence on it, and from my business partners having experience in the third party insurance side of piece, he knew there was a gap there.
Yeah.
He knew that insurance companies are paying through the nose for medications, paying through the nose for a long-term, short-term disability. And really, that was our value proposition. Our value proposition was going into these companies going, we can decrease the long-term disability and getting those people back to work. We can decrease that through our programs. We can decrease as far as medications go, because we can be more proactive in people's health, etc. So
Right.
we did all that investigating. And two, my business partner knew the gap that was there in the industry. Plus, with my own personal experience of trying to find my dad care and rehab, there wasn't anything.
Yeah.
Through public service. So hence, we just really saw from a private perspective, huge opportunity.
Let's stay specific to your business and enter the COVID conversation.
Yeah. Oh boy, the COVID conversation.
Or don't. We can skip past it.
Well, it was interesting. The month that the government shut us all down, we would have broke even in both clinics. So, we had worked now. When did we get shut down? Was that
March 2020?
2020. So by the time we got the clinics open, we were 2018. So, we were operating up and running for 2 years. We always had to get to a certain number of membership to break even. And we would have been there the month that they shut us down.
Jeez.
So we went from almost profitability to zero overnight.
Yeah.
And we lost, in one of our clinics, 80% of our membership overnight.
Yeah.
In the other clinic, we lost 50% overnight. Still responsible for paying the leases, still responsible for paying the staff. We did have to lay off. our staff. We just couldn't afford. So, we needed to lay off a few people from that. I mean, I think we all know what happened. We fought the battle that we were an essential service. We saw ourselves more in the healthcare than the fitness piece.
Yeah.
Government didn't see it that way. The franchisor did all they could do to lobby, to get us back open. Eventually, we were reopened, but kind of the damage had been done. Like, to try and recover was very challenging. We pivoted by doing like online stuff, but part of our value proposition was whenever members came in, depending on their medical condition, we're taking their blood pressure, we're taking their blood sugars, we're taking their pulse ox, their O2 saturations. We've got kinesiologists that are watching them to fitness. While they're doing their fitness, we're taking their blood pressure halfway through their sessions to make sure they're good. So that was probably our biggest value proposition. And online, that's really, it's impossible to do, right? Like, you can't do it.
Yeah.
So we did transition from that, and then we transitioned to smaller classes, space everybody out, and even our members, they had enough. They're like, this doesn't work for me, I'm out. And we could not get back to where we needed to be. So again, I'll give you the framework, but it got to a point where we had to make a decision. So at one point we decided we need to shut one of our clinics down, which actually was our biggest clinic. Largest burn rate. And thought, okay, we just need to shut that one down. So we shut that one down. The second one we had was doing okay. We had probably 20-25% come back. So now we're about at 75% of where we needed to be from a break-even point. But again, I don't want to get into too much detail around the business. We weren't happy with the business and the way things were being conducted at the corporate level. So we made the decision to sell the franchise back to the franchisor.
Gotcha.
So we went through that process, which again, never been through. But you don't, it's interesting. I don't think people realize when you own a business, it's not just shut the doors. We had a 10-year lease.
Yeah.
We had a 10-year lease. We had all our employees. We had all the equipment that, within 2 years isn't paid for yet.
Yeah.
So, we had to negotiate with RBC. We had to negotiate with the BDC. We had to negotiate with our landlord, to try and reduce the risk to us personally, because as a small business, like you had said earlier, a lot of your folks are small business people. Well, we were the guarantor on all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, we at least set up our businesses properly. We had 2 opcos, holdcos, and then us, right? So we structured everything properly, which that being in the public space really helped me out, or helped us out for understanding how to structure deals. But still, long story short, we didn't want to bankrupt. So I had to find the capital to pay off the bills. So we lost the house. I had to sell the house. I had to dig into my investments, and that was 7 figures to get everything out and go free and clear. It was tough. I mean, I'm still really digging out from underneath it. And my goodness, actually, my wife and I talked about this the other night. I think we're 4 years, 5 years, almost 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 years, and still, at my age, I didn't expect to start all over again. It was tough. There was lots of things through that experience. Actually, this is maybe the day we decided to shut down our one clinic, I get a phone call from my daughter's boyfriend. And I knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted her hand in marriage.
Yeah.
And here I am on one hand, ruined financially, to, okay, that's the happiest thing I can, this sort of screwing with my brain emotionally.
Yeah.
That was tough, Trev, but I went through it was just tough.
Yeah.
I mean, there were times where I'm like, where did I go wrong? How did I, what did I do wrong? There were times where I'm like, maybe my family would just be better off without me. You know, I'm kind of exposing all the warts here, but I told you I'd be open with this. It was hard. It was hard. It was not fun. It was not a
Yeah.
fun experience. I felt like a failure. Um, I, yeah, it was rough. It was really rough.
And I mean, you look at all the things that we can do as aspiring business owners, as existing business owners, as startups, and like if there was a checklist, you did them all,
Yeah,
right? Like you knew, you had the business plan, you had the partnership, you had the financing, you knew what the risks were. One thing that you said there was kind of I didn't think at this stage in my life I'd be where I am, or where I was after all of this. Um, and that's something that comes up quite a bit as the folks, when they're telling their story, you know, when they were in their late 20s, early 30s, the decisions to take that risk, to step out on that ledge, tend to be a lot easier because you don't have as much to lose. You've got time to repair anything that might happen. You weren't looking at it from that risk perspective. You had mitigated all of the risk.
yeah,
It was a global phenomenon that put you in that position. And I think, I mean, not that this is turning into a therapy session or anything, but I think that's where a lot of people who were, I was in the same boat, right? And so many business owners were, that it's like this great big unexpected environment, and you get a little bit resentful of this idea that you could aspire to do something, and then it's pulled out from under you because nobody told you about this unexpected risk that nobody could anticipate, right? You
yeah,
did all the right things and it still came crumbling down.
yeah. Black swan event, right?
Yeah.
And trust
Yeah.
me, like I did go through that thought process that, you know, when I'd start down that path of like, oh, what did you do wrong? Wait a minute, I didn't do anything wrong.
No.
I did
Yeah,
nothing
I mean,
wrong.
yeah.
Actually, we were doing everything right.
Yeah.
But then that shifts to family.
Yeah.
That shifts to, now my family is affected by this. And I think that's where I took the biggest hit, was emotionally, was, wow, I got to tell my wife we have to sell the house.
Yeah.
I, where, you know, got to tell my kid, oh, we're moving. Where? I don't know. What are we
Yeah.
going to do? I don't know. Like, there was a lot of I don't knows. And I think, being the personality that I am, and like we've even talked about, you know, when you step into a business venture, you mitigate the risk. There's a little bit of I don't know, but for the most part, you've mitigated most of it.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
was stepping into a world where I didn't know. I had
Yeah.
never been here, no idea. I don't know what happens when you bankrupt, or if you bankrupt. I don't know what happens when,
Right.
like, I never experienced it.
Right.
You know, you hear the stats that, you know, financial issues end marriages, you know, like all these things are going through your head. Now, again, my wife and I have a very strong foundation in our marriage. And she supported me, and she was part of the business too. So she knew what was going on,
Sure.
in that world too. So it wasn't just me, her and I went through that together.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think it shifted it, because, to be totally frank, the business is the business. Yep. Shut the doors. No big deal. But
Yeah.
then there's this massive financial impact and massive emotional impact that
Yeah.
hits you.
Yeah.
I can truthfully say I wasn't emotionally attached to the business, but I was definitely emotionally attached to my family and what I wanted for them and what I wanted to build. I was attached to that for sure.
Yeah.
And that was hard. That was really hard. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that part of the story. I know, you know, that's really the catalyst for all of this, to, you know, demonstrate to other business owners that they're not alone, that these things happen to so many people. And I think what is sad is when COVID happened, that was kind of one of the pieces that I amplified, was now we've got this environment where business owners can safely be vulnerable, and the consumers are kind of have us, our backs as business owners. And what's really unfortunate is that we've moved away from that. I think we're back to kind of pre-COVID times where there's kind of business owners aren't talking about it as much. There's a perception that business, isn't as hard as it actually is, and that kind of thing. So, business is fucking hard. It just is, and it doesn't matter. Like, you can be as ready as you want to be. There's things that happen, and that happens in life, that happens in society, that happens in economics and politics and greater macro market areas.
Yeah.
But it also, all of that happens in business, and
Yeah.
it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, but when I look back, I learned a lot about myself through that, Trevor.
Sure.
I think when I was in mining, I was pursuing status, I was pursuing power, I was just pursuing money. I wasn't a very empathetic person in that business. And going through what I've gone through has changed me for the better. So I've really, I think I'm a much more empathetic person. I think my focus is on the right things now versus if we want to call them the material things, but because those things can be gone overnight.
Yeah.
Where now it's intentional with relationships. It's caring for others. It's, my mantra, take your eyes off yourself and put them on others.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that just the self-awareness, for not only your reflection on yourself today and that, but who you were yesterday and kind of that evolution. I think just that self-awareness, identifies the EQ that you've developed, that empathy, that emotional intelligence. So
yeah.
I don't want to end without talking about the final transition. I don't want to put a lot of emphasis on it because I don't want this. I've really tried to not make this a real estate podcast, even though that's the world that I live in. So trying to pull other stories, but it is a piece of your journey and your business journey. You after selling the house, you explored what other options there were. And that's where our paths have crossed, is in the real estate space. So just a little bit, really briefly on kind of that, what opened that door to get your real estate license and explore
the
industry.
Actually, I have a buddy that's been in the business for decades, and he actually approached me the day we signed the paperwork for those clinics and said, I want you to come work with me in real estate. And I'm like, dude, I just signed.
Right.
Everything's signed, right? In hindsight,
yeah, no, don't do it.
I kind of wish I had done that, but anyways, hindsight, right? 2020. Yeah. But oh man, so transition from that. We had finished with the clinics, and then I'm kind of like, okay, what am I going to do? And I've reinvented myself many times. So I've had to reinvent myself many times, and I was just like, again, my buddy approached me. He goes, look, come work with me. Come do real estate. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So let's see, 4 years. I'm going to share my age. I'm 57 now. So I've been in the business for 4 years. So not quite 4 years, 3.5 years. And I'm like, that means I got to open a textbook.
Yeah.
So for those of you that aren't in real estate, the textbook's about 40 inches thick. And, I the last time I had ever done an exam or done was my securities course.
Right. Sure.
I'm like, so anyways, go through all that, get licensed, and then kind of off to the races. I actually, now being in the business, I wish I had gotten in, not even just financially, but I just really I've always liked helping people. One thing we haven't touched on, but I was a volunteer firefighter for years. I ski patrol. I was a lifeguard. Like I've always liked
Nice.
helping people,
Yeah.
and even the clinics that we had,
Yeah. I
that
was
was,
just going to make that connection.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was helping people.
Yeah.
And even in real estate, that's what I'm able to do. But I think too, as though I have the business experience as well. Real estate is a business. You have to build a business.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I have a certain acumen that I can speak to, versus those maybe haven't had the life experience that I have. Actually, sorry, I'm going to stop myself. Sound like I'm selling myself here. Um, but I made that transition, and and it too. I mean, I'm like, well, okay, here I am back at the bottom again. I'm doing,
Yeah.
hey, can I cover an open house for you?
Right.
Hey,
Yeah.
can I, back to the bottom,
Yeah.
and work my way up through to, to where, agents that have been in the business for many, many years, I'm not saying they don't have to seek new business, but a lot of their business comes through referral.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to tap into my network and let people know. And, a lot of times, well, I know so-and-so, so, like, yeah, okay. All right. I've
Yeah.
had friends use somebody else. Been down that path, but,
Yeah.
yeah, so, I've been enjoying it. As you know, I got involved with the real estate board. Wanted to be able to give back because I've sat on many boards in the past and still sit on other boards. So wanted to be able to give back that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's.
Well, I think I mean one of the other themes. I hate to just keep connecting the themes whenever I talk to somebody new, but I mean that is kind of one of the pieces around this podcast is these commonalities, identifying those, really highlighting what the common experiences are, and um, like maybe it wasn't as much in the software and the mining piece, but this theme of purpose before profit always comes up. Like, what is your driving force? What do you really want to do? Not just from a business perspective, but what's the purpose of the business? What is the fulfillment that you're getting, but you're also giving?
Yeah.
And I think yours, like you can read those tea leaves pretty easily. That you're helping people. Kind of motivation, whether it's through volunteer efforts as you identified, or in what you do in business. I think that that is definitely very obvious, and then I would say the vulnerability that you've demonstrated here, and just your openness to sharing and talking about these things is really feeding that empathy and that self-awareness piece. And Brian, I am really grateful that our paths have crossed. I look forward to continuing a friendship and keeping in touch. But really, a genuine thank you for doing this, and for being so vulnerable with your story and sharing. It means a lot.
Oh, absolutely my pleasure. It took it. I have shared my story, but it took me a
Sure.
while to share the story. Like, and there's things we haven't even gotten into,
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
from a vulnerability perspective. But,
Yeah.
if there's just even just a tiniest little thing that someone hears that resonates, all I can say is, be strong, drive through it. Do not beat yourself up. We all
Yeah.
do it, but that is the worst way to go. And yeah, that's
Really awesome.
I don't.
Thanks so much, man. Really appreciate you being
All
here.
right, Trev. Thanks so much, buddy.
Yeah.
Take care. Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely.
All right, bud.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Business is Fucking Hard. Please remember that this show is meant to create community and share ideas in the business world. For advice specific to your business, talk to an expert in your industry. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on Instagram and LinkedIn and invite others to do the same. This episode was hosted by me, Trevor Coote, and produced and edited by Alex Harris. Thanks for tuning in, and talk to you next time.